The story of Marley and Ernie is not a fairy tale. It is a profound biological paradox, unfolding not in a wild forest, but in the ordinary quiet of an English home. It is the moment a centuries-old predator-prey dynamic was simply forgotten, dismissed by the deep, raw necessity of companionship. A tiny, fragile life was brought into a safe space, yet its most intimidating resident, a massive bulldog, was the one who first recoiled. This is the truth of that unlikely union. Where instinct failed, pure love prevailed. The emotional core of this story asks, if a fox and a dog can find a love that transcends the fundamental laws of their nature, what separates us all? Now let's enter their world. If you're already enjoying this story, a quick like and share makes all the difference. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. The story begins with a woman named Pauline Oceanola, an avid animal lover on the Isle of Wight in England. Pauline had a dream of becoming a dog groomer, a path that required immense dedication and a deep well of patience. She lived in a home already full of life and compassion, but in the spring of 2020, her life's trajectory was completely redefined by an emergency call. The creature on the other end of the line was not a domestic dog, but a tiny, barely alive kit, a fox cub found abandoned and severely compromised. The situation was dire. The cub was approximately 2 weeks old, a small bundle of red-brown fur that was more vulnerable than anything Pauline had ever nursed. She was covered in flies and ticks, her tiny body ravaged by internal parasites. Vets confirmed her status. Without Pauline's constant care, she had mere minutes to live. Giving up her professional aspirations, Pauline committed herself to the tiny fox, who she named Marley. She began a grueling routine of syringe feeding the cub kitten milk every 90 minutes, day and night. Marley's fragile life was suspended by this relentless, round-the-clock commitment. This intense phase of nurturing lasted for 6 weeks. The home became Marley's intensive care unit. Pauline meticulously managed a cocktail of medications, battling the aggressive worms and infections that threatened the cub's developing organs. This was not just feeding. It was a defiant negotiation with mortality itself. It was a period of exhaustion and hope, where the line between wild and domestic blurred entirely. The only constant in this environment, besides Pauline, was the large, imposing presence of the family's senior dog, Ernie, a bulldog. Ernie was a dog known for his gentle nature, yet his initial reaction to the sickly little fox cub was one of complete and utter confusion. He would peer over the edge of the box where Marley rested, his large, wrinkly face a mask of apprehension. A silent tension filled the room, a low hum of thousands of years of evolutionary programming that whispered caution. To Ernie's ancient instincts, this was not a companion. It was a wild scent, a different kind of animal altogether. He retreated often, preferring a wide berth to any interaction. Pauline knew the bond she hoped for could not be forced. It had to be earned by a tiny, resilient fox and a very confused bulldog. The challenge was not only to heal Marley's body, but to settle the primal anxiety of the household. The dog, Ernie the bulldog, was a picture of nervous curiosity. He was a large, muscle-bound creature whose very presence should have been a threat to a tiny wild predator. Instead, he was afraid. For the first few days, Ernie would simply stare from a distance, then quickly retreat. He didn't understand the sounds, the smell, or the erratic, feverish movements of the kit. Marley, too, had an initial fear, instinctively wary of the massive animal in her space. Pauline noted that for the first 3 weeks, the interactions were non-existent, defined only by the distance they kept. Ernie was terrified of Marley at first, and she didn't like him. This was a crucial period. The bonding was not a sudden burst of Disney magic. It was a slow, deliberate truce based on shared space and the ambient scent of safety that Pauline provided. They would slowly start sleeping closer, but always with a barrier of blankets or a measured gap between them. The first silent negotiation was about proximity. Could the ancient rival afford to relax near the other? The answer at first was a tentative, conditional yes. This acceptance was the turning point. The initial 3 weeks were a period of tense, wary observation. Marley, now gradually recovering her strength, was still too weak to be a threat. Yet her inherent fox nature, the long, pointed snout, the quick movements, was enough to keep Ernie at bay. He was a creature designed for loyalty and comfort, but the wildness in Marley's eyes spoke a different language. However, as Pauline maintained her tireless vigil, the atmosphere began to shift. The constant presence of the fox cub, now less a sickly patient and more a playful irritant, started to normalize. The bulldog began to associate the sharp scent of the fox not with danger, but with the pervasive, constant smell of home and safety. The breakthrough was a matter of pure physical proximity. They started sleeping in the same room. Then they started sleeping in sight of each other. Eventually, a silent, unspoken agreement was reached. Marley would sleep on a blanket just a few feet from Ernie's bed. This closeness, established out of necessity during the long nights of Pauline's care, became their new baseline. It was a negotiation of space, won through sheer, non-threatening duration. Pauline's consistent gentleness toward Marley gave Ernie the psychological permission he needed to re-evaluate his deeply ingrained instincts. One day, Marley, now stronger, moved her sleeping spot an inch closer. Ernie did not move. He did not growl. He simply tolerated it. That silent tolerance was the genesis of their bond. Marley, who had been deprived of her own mother's warmth, sought out the next best source of unconditional security, and in the sheer mass of the bulldog, she found it. Ernie, conversely, seemed to be slowly activating an evolutionary circuit that had been bred into dogs for millennia, the impulse to guard the vulnerable. He wasn't protecting her from a threat. He was protecting her from the loneliness of her own nature. The bulldog was learning to overwrite millennia of genetic programming with the simple, immediate language of warmth. This subtle shift from passive tolerance to protective acceptance was the true beginning of their friendship, paved by patience and the quiet miracle of a shared, safe roof. The bond moved past mere tolerance and into the territory of genuine kinship only when Marley, after 4 months of medication and constant care, finally achieved stable health. She was no longer just a patient. She was a mischievous, energetic fox cub. The transformation was immediate and joyful. The day the two species truly connected began with a simple act of play. It started when Marley, in a burst of energy, playfully nipped at Ernie's ear. Instead of reacting with a snarl or retreat, the bulldog responded with a lumbering, playful hip check. The tension broke in a sudden rush of pure, unbridled canine joy. They started running around together in the garden, their motions a chaotic ballet that defied every wildlife documentary ever filmed. The bulldog, a heavy domestic creature, learned to adapt his movements to the swift dodging sprints of the young fox. The fox, still wild in her heart, learned to pull her sharp teeth and temper her instinctive cunning. Their play was a continuous conversation that required no shared vocabulary, only a shared intent for joy. This was the proving ground. Could their fragile attachment survive the rough-and-tumble reality of a true friendship? The answer was a resounding, playful yes. Pauline watched, astonished, as the relationship solidified. The bulldog's initial fear had been completely replaced by a curious form of nurturing loyalty. If Marley went outside, Ernie was right behind her. If Ernie moved to another room, Marley would quickly follow, often leaping onto his back or nudging her nose into his neck. The ancient evolutionary wall between the two creatures had not just crumbled. It had been dismantled piece by piece by persistent companionship. They were not merely coexisting, they were coordinating, relying on each other for social interaction that their own species could not provide in that context. Ernie became Marley's anchor to the stable, domestic world, and Marley became the spark of unpredictable joy in Ernie's measured bulldog life. They had successfully built a new kind of family unit. The depth of their connection reached its emotional crest not in a dramatic rescue, but in the mundane rhythms of daily life. They truly became inseparable. They played together all day long, a continuous, exhausting motion of chasing and tumbling, and they would sleep together every single night. The visual of the heavy-set bulldog curled around the sleek, lithe body of the fox cub became commonplace, yet remained a beautiful anomaly. Marley, the wild creature, would go into a state of visible excitement whenever Ernie returned from a walk without her. She would go mad, Pauline recalled, with pure, concentrated joy at his return, confirming that the bond was mutual and deeply felt. Pauline herself came to recognize the profound utility of their kinship. She fondly referred to the bulldog as Marley's babysitter or her nanny dog. If she needed a break, she would simply tell Ernie, "Go and play with your little sister." He understood the assignment perfectly, immediately engaging the fox in the boisterous, protective play that defined their days. This was not just a strange tolerance. It was a division of parental labor, a shared responsibility. Their quiet, unquestioning acceptance of one another became the story's ultimate therapeutic proof. The bulldog, who could have easily dispatched the fox, offered only safety. The fox, whose wild ancestors saw the dog as both rival and danger, offered only trust. In the profound calm of their shared presence, there was no room for the ancient rules of the wild. It was a bond forged in mutual need. Marley needed a protector, and Ernie needed a purpose. The friendship became a living, breathing testament to the idea that love is always louder than instinct. The profound partnership of Marley and Ernie ultimately offered a gentle, undeniable lesson. The instinct for connection is a force stronger than the instinct for survival. The bulldog's ancient programming was rewritten by the simple, constant presence of a vulnerable creature. Marley, the fox, grew up knowing not the sharp terror of the canine predator, but the unwavering warmth of a massive, wrinkly protector. Their story became a true life fable, circulating across the world not as a curiosity, but as a source of genuine therapeutic relief. The tale of the fox and the bulldog serves as a powerful antidote to the world's cynicism, a silent, furry demonstration that empathy is the default setting of the heart. Their friendship was not a momentary lapse of nature, but a quiet, sustained testament to the boundless potential for love across all boundaries. It reminds us that whether wild or domestic, predator or prey, the desire to be seen, to be safe, and to be loved is a universal driving force. Marley and Ernie's shared naps and boisterous play left an indelible mark, a blueprint for how harmony can be built, one quiet, trusting moment at a time. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to light. We have a question for you. What was the single moment in this story that resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.